Imagine I place a coffee mug on the table in front of you. Nothing unusual. White ceramic, comfortable handle. Maybe there's a small design on the side. And I ask you a simple question. How much would you pay for it? You look at the mug. You think about it for a moment. Maybe you say $3, maybe $5. But probably not much more. After all, it's just a mug. Now imagine something slightly different. Instead of asking you to buy it, I give it to you. It's yours. You pick it up, maybe turn it over in your hands. Then you place it beside you. A few minutes pass, and now I ask whether I can buy it back. Same mug, same room, same afternoon. Nothing about the object has changed. So logically, your answer shouldn't change very much either. If it was worth around $5 when you didn't own it, it should still be worth around $5 now. But something strange can happen. Now that the mug belongs to you, $5 may no longer feel like enough. Maybe you want 7, 8, 10. Maybe you don't particularly want to sell it at all. And notice what's happened. The mug didn't become more useful. It didn't become more beautiful. No one told you it was rare. Its market value didn't suddenly increase. The only thing that changed was ownership. A few moments ago, you were deciding how much the mug was worth acquiring. Now, you're deciding how much it's worth giving up. And psychologically, those may not be the same question. Because once something becomes ours, we can begin valuing it differently. Not because the object changed, but because our relationship to it did. And that small shift can change what something feels worth. Psychologists and economists have a name for this: the endowment effect. It describes a surprisingly common tendency. Once we own something, we often value it more highly than we did before it became ours. You can see it in possessions, in negotiations, in the price someone wants for an old car or a house they've lived in for 20 years. Sometimes even in objects that were assigned to us only moments ago. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If ownership can change how valuable something feels, then how much of what we call value actually belongs to the object? And how much belongs to us? To understand that, we first have to understand what happens the moment something becomes mine. In a simple economic world, the mug shouldn't care who owns it, and neither should its value. If two people are looking at the same object with the same qualities at the same moment, ownership alone shouldn't magically make that object more valuable. One person might like it more than another, of course, but simply transferring possession shouldn't suddenly transform what the object is worth. For a long time, traditional economic models treated preferences as relatively stable. We evaluate an object. We decide how useful or desirable it is, and that evaluation helps determine what we're willing to pay for it. But ownership introduces something peculiar. Before we own an object, we evaluate the possibility of gaining it. After we own it, the same transaction requires us to give it up. And those two experiences may look identical on a balance sheet, but they don't necessarily feel identical inside the mind. This distinction became especially important as psychologists and economists began questioning the assumption that human beings evaluate gains and losses in perfectly symmetrical ways. Because perhaps the question wasn't simply, how much is this worth? Perhaps another question had quietly entered the calculation. What will it feel like to lose it? And once researchers began asking that question, a very ordinary coffee mug became surprisingly important. The experiment that helped make the endowment effect famous was almost absurdly simple. Researchers Daniel Kahneman, Jack Knetsch, and Richard Thaler gave ordinary coffee mugs to some participants. The mugs weren't rare, they weren't personalized, and the people receiving them hadn't owned them for years. They had owned them for minutes. Other participants received nothing. And then the researchers created a market. The people who owned mugs could sell them. The people without mugs could buy them. In principle, this should have been straightforward. Everyone was looking at essentially the same object, the same mug, the same usefulness, the same market. But the prices people placed on that mug were not the same. The owners wanted considerably more money to give up their mugs than the buyers were willing to pay to acquire them. And that gap mattered, because these weren't cherished possessions. There were no childhood memories attached to them, no years of use, no story. Ownership itself had existed only briefly. And yet, that brief possession appeared to change the transaction. Before receiving the mug, it was simply an object someone might acquire. After receiving it, selling required surrendering something that was already theirs. The physical mug hadn't changed, but psychologically, the reference point had. And once researchers saw that, the strange little discrepancy between buying and selling began pointing towards something much larger. Perhaps ownership wasn't merely telling us what belonged to whom. Perhaps ownership was changing the experience of losing it. To understand why that matters, we need to return to an idea we've encountered before: loss aversion. Human beings don't always experience gains and losses as equal opposites. Losing something can feel more consequential than gaining something of comparable value feels rewarding. And ownership can quietly determine which side of that equation we're standing on. Imagine the mug doesn't belong to you. You look at it and ask, what would I gain by having this? Maybe the answer is not very much. It's useful, it's fine. Perhaps you'd pay a few dollars for it. But now the mug is yours. The question changes. You're no longer deciding what you would gain by acquiring it. You're deciding what you would lose by giving it away. Same mug, different reference point. And this is where ownership becomes psychologically powerful. The moment something enters our possession, we can begin treating its absence as a loss. Not necessarily consciously, and not because we've suddenly discovered some hidden quality in the object. The change can happen because the baseline has moved. Before ownership, not having the mug was normal. After ownership, having the mug becomes normal. And now, giving it up means moving away from what we already have. That helps explain why buyers and sellers can look at exactly the same object and arrive at very different numbers. The buyer sees the cost of acquiring it. The owner feels the cost of surrendering it. And the endowment effect can become even stronger when ownership has existed longer, or when the object becomes connected to identity, memory, effort, or personal meaning. A house isn't merely square footage. An old car isn't merely transportation. A box in the attic may be almost worthless to everyone else and surprisingly difficult for us to throw away. Because once something becomes part of our world, we don't always evaluate it from the outside anymore. We evaluate what it would mean for it to no longer be there. And that's the hidden shift. Ownership doesn't necessarily make an object better. It can simply make giving it up feel worse. Once you recognize the endowment effect, you begin seeing it in places that have nothing to do with coffee mugs. The house you've lived in for 20 years. The car you've driven for 10. The furniture you keep, even though you would never buy it today. The clothes hanging in the back of a closet. The boxes we move from one home to another without opening them. And sometimes, ownership affects much larger decisions. Someone selling a home may believe it's worth more than buyers are willing to pay. An investor may hold an asset longer than they otherwise would because selling means accepting that it will no longer be theirs. But the effect doesn't require something expensive. Sometimes, all it requires is the word mine. Once something becomes ours, we can stop asking what we would pay to acquire it today and begin asking what it would take to make us give it up. Those sound like the same question. They aren't. So how do we know when ownership is influencing us? One useful approach is to temporarily remove ownership from the question. Instead of asking, "How much would I sell this for?" ask, "If I didn't already own this, how much would I pay to buy it today? Would I buy this chair? Would I buy these clothes? Would I buy this stock? Would I choose this house at this price if it weren't already mine?" The answer doesn't automatically mean you should sell anything. The point isn't to value our possessions less, it's to see them, for a moment, from outside ownership. Because sometimes changing the question changes the value we thought we saw. Think again about the mug. When we first placed it on the table, it was nothing special. White ceramic, a handle, something to hold coffee. Then we gave it to someone, and almost immediately, the question changed. It was no longer simply, "What is this worth?" It became, "What would you have to give me to take this away?" Same mug, same ceramic, same handle, same usefulness. Nothing about the object changed, but something changed in the person looking at it. The mug became theirs. And sometimes that's all ownership needs to begin changing value. Because the things we own don't exist only in the world. They also occupy a place in us. And giving something up can feel like losing more than the thing itself.